Today we talk about the giant FAQ that dropped yesterday. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. As always, my name is Jay, and in this video I'm going to talk about the FAQ that dropped yesterday from Games Workshop. It was a bomb. It was huge. Now, we've been expecting a very large FAQ for a while. It was supposed to be in March. Happened in April. That's okay. Better late than never. And man, did it rock. I'd say the really competitive world. Not really my world, to be honest. Some of the rules, it's going to affect how I play the game, and it's affect my strategies, but I'm not broken overall. It's kind of like the win at all cost gamers, the ones who got most affected by this. And that's my cat. Apparently he doesn't like me being in here. It tended to be the win at all cost gamers that got most affected by this FAQ. Now, obviously, a lot of rules did change, and as I said, will change how we play the game. So let's go over it. Obviously, there was the big FAQ. There was FAQs to about about 10 other codices and books. Not all the books got updated. I'm pretty sure Grey Knights didn't get updated. There were a few big changes to Tyranids. I'll go over that one because that's the army I've been focusing on the most in this edition, and some Orc rules as well. But yeah, there were some big changes. The big FAQ, number one, Psychic Focus is now in effect. The big thing with Psychic Focus is obviously Smite. A lot of people were building their armies to focus on Smite, right? You can cast Smite from everybody, and it was the only power that you could cast more than once a turn, so people were just spamming Smite. Now, of course, it's getting a little harder. Now what you do is every time after the first one you cast Smite, you have to add 1 to the amount of the roll that you require, up to a total of 11 at highest. Now, for an army like I play like Orcs, it really won't play into effect. I have one, I usually play with one Weird Boy. Now, even if you brought 3 Weird Boys, and we'll go over that later, the rule of 3 now. Even if you brought 3 Weird Boys, it won't affect you too badly because for every 10 models in proximity to them, you add 1 to the dice anyway. So it would prevent, it negates it pretty easily. It makes it easier to cast, psychic powers if you're an Orc, if you want to cast Smite anyway. So that's okay. And but again, if you're spamming Psychers, yes, it will be slightly harder to get these powers off. Now, that being said, it doesn't affect, I think, the ones with Brotherhood of Psychers rules. So I think Grey Knights and I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section down below. Grey Knights and like Thousand Suns won't be affected as heavily as people running just a lot of Psychers. Now, the other thing is targeting characters. GW did double down on their rules with targeting characters. It's a kind of an odd rule, but I understand it, I guess, now that you can't have a model join a squad. If it's a character, it becomes easier to kill, and they doubled down on the rule. They clearly stated that an enemy character with a wounds characteristic of less than 10 can only be chosen as a target in the shooting phase if it is most visible to the firing model and is the closest enemy unit to the firing model. However, this is the new part. Ignore other enemy characters with a wounds characteristic of less than 10 when determining if the target is the closest enemy unit to the firing model. This means that if any other enemy units other than the character with the wounds characteristic of less than 10 are closer, whether they're visible or not, then the enemy character cannot be targeted. So now you can kind of ignore other enemy characters with wounds characteristics of less than 10. That's cool. So you can't stick, like, let's say we're playing Space Marines. You can't stick an Apothecary in front of Gilliman and prevent that from shooting Gilliman. Gilliman can be targeted now if the closest model to him is just characters with wounds characteristics of less than 10. So okay, they doubled down on that. It's kind of a weird rule. I understand why, but it's kind of just it's really weird playing. And if I have a model hidden in a building, you can't shoot my guy who's out in the open. It's kind of odd, but no, these are the beta matched play rules. Huge change to tactical reserves. Tactical reserves used to be half your squads or units could be placed in reserve, and they can come on through various number of methods. Most of the time it's deep striking, placing 9 inches away from your opponent, or just over 9 inches. It's been changed now from half your models to half your power units, half your power levels. So now it's to prevent basically from someone taking like again, this would happen a lot with when I play Tyranids. You keep the smaller squads in the back, you deep strike in the big guys right in front of your opponent, and you try to decimate them. You can't do that anymore. Now you have to place half your power levels in reserve, so essentially half the strength of your army can be in reserves, right? And the rest has to be on the table at least. So that does change things as well. The other big change is any reserves that arrive on the table in turn 1 have to be placed in your deployment zone. So it does deny your opponent still the right to shoot them if your opponent's going first, but you can't get that Alpha Strike off as easily. That's a huge change. That's a huge change. So that means if you want to be a deep strike army that it goes for the opponent or in their zone, you have to wait till turn 2. There has to be, they forfeit the turn 1 Alpha Strike. Now with models like Hive Tyrants with wings, it's still pretty viable to start them on the table if you think you're going first, because they can just fly 16 inches anyway. But that is a huge change in the game. That's a huge change. Basically, GW was finding that, what I do find interesting with the FAQ is GW is actually justifying their choices, and actually it's pretty cool that they're doing that. They're actually showing why they made the decisions that they made. We're noticing that a lot of players were being taken out turn 1, right? And I've had this happen before, both on the winning and the losing side of that turn 1 you can deep strike in and just decimate your opponent. And you can't do that anymore. You have to deploy in your deployment zone. So once again, it would deny your opponent the shooting, but you can't get that Alpha Strike off, essentially, because you started your deployment zone. The other thing is now they've also, in the rulebook FAQ part, they've also taken this one step further to prevent people from still breaking this. It's also, this rule is not voided by special rules like the Swarm Lord, who has an ability to allow you to make another move in the shooting phase to forfeit your shooting phase. So let's say I deep strike a Hive Tyrant right in front of the Swarm Lord. I cannot use that rule from the Swarm Lord to allow that model to move outside of my deployment zone. So that's pretty big. And it is all the other, the other exceptions that they've all been put in and then said you can't use those rules to allow your model then to move out of the deployment zone once it has deep struck in. So again, it's going to be, turn 1 is not going to be as bloody as it was in a lot of games, especially in the competitive meta, but we're going to talk about the competitive meta later. It took a huge hit, and I'll talk about that one too. The other thing is Battle Brothers. Battle Brothers, now all the units in each detachment in your Battle-Forged army must have at least one faction keyword in common. In addition, the keyword cannot be Chaos, Imperium, Eldari, Ynnari, or Tyranids, unless the detachment in question is a fortification network. This has no effect on the on your army faction. The reason is, and I never really did this, apparently people were creating what's called soup army lists, where it would be like an HQ from Space Marines, elites from Inquisition, or Astra Militarum. People were just essentially creating giant grab bags of lists to bring the most competitive from each army into one list. Got nerfed, right? I don't think it was, as they said in the comments, it really wasn't what they had in mind when they were creating the new rules, so they changed it. People were kind of abusing a rule that they didn't really think about, which happens a lot in our games. There were some other big points changes, which I'll go over later. They've changed some rules. They nerfed some rules, obviously. Let me go back to here. Sorry. There were a few interim balance reviews, so detachment command benefits. They've changed the amount of command points for both battalion and brigade detachments, which is going to be insane for Astra Militarum, because they can really build, same with like Tyranids can and Orcs can, but Astra Militarum I find is like the most powerful army that can bring a brigade detachment at like 1,500 points, 2,000 points. It's now 12 plus command points, plus they have some pretty nasty, stratagems or warlord traits that allow them to regain their command points anyway. So that's going to be huge for Astra Militarum, and so it's now 5 plus 5 command points for a battalion, plus 12 command points for a brigade. once again, it makes them more taking, and they're going to be really nasty for armies like Astra Militarum. Tide of Traders got nerfed because people were, it was too effective, as they said. So as a result, they nerfed it. You can only be used once per battle. That's, I'm pretty sure, the bring your cultists back up to full strength. They also made a huge nerf to the whole zombie cultist lists. I'll talk about that after. Let's see. Abilities which ignore wounds. You can't stack multiple ones at the same time. So you can only use one per shooting. Organized play. This is the big one. So organized play got a huge change, and I'm actually okay with this. I'm not a competitive player. I don't play win at all cost lists, and I've never really understood why people fork out the money for they do. I guess they love it. They love playing the lists. It's not the most creative meta. Let's take Tyranids, for example. I like to play, some HQs, maybe monster creatures are a lot of fun to run. Gene Stealers, Brewer Lords, you can run a bunch of different lists, right? Tyranid Warriors. The competitive meta was basically, for most armies, figure out what's most points cost effective and the most scary, and spam it. Figure out how to get as many as you can into your army, and put as minimum other points in any other thing to make the list legal. Let's take Tyranids. So Tyranids, right now the competitive meta is all Flyrants and Biovores, right? A normal list could have 9 Hive Tyrants at a 2,000 point list. Not the most creative list, not the most fun list, and I guess people, if we want to go out and buy 9 Hive Tyrants and paint 9 Hive Tyrants with wings and field 9 Hive Tyrants, feel free. But, like, you're a win at all cost player, right? You went out and spent $900 on, it's not necessarily $900, it's probably like $600 on, maybe $700, whatever, on a list that you're just going to play in a tournament in a really, really competitive scene to hopefully stomp your opponents, right? And that's what the competitive meta was breeding. All these games where you could literally walk in and you could identify the most cheesy thing in an army by just looking at the table, right? So if you go to an ITC or an ETC game tournament, look at a Tyranid list, all you'll see is Flyrants or Biovores. Biovores were extremely cost effective and they can cause mortal wounds without even hitting your opponent. So what do you find? People were bringing in like 24 Biovores or 9 Hive Tyrants. And of course, GW, of course, has actually been keeping, I talked with a couple GW employees about this, especially the rules team. They've been keeping up with the meta. They now know what is beyond the cheesy cheese, and they are now going to hit with the nerf hammer every 6 months. They're going to make sure that people try to bring more rounded lists, even in competitive play. Remember, you can be a competitive person and be a very good general without bringing the win at all cost lists. Or you could make a well-rounded list that's a win at all cost list. You don't have to bring 9 Hive Tyrants or 24 Biovores. And so as this is the day after the FAQ, I've seen several people pop up in the local metas trying to sell like 24 Biovores. And I thought to myself, did you go out and spend like $1,500 on Biovores? I know this video is going to give me a little flack for that, but as I said, like, I like to play lists for fun, or even I could play competitively, but I don't spend $1,500 on 24 models just so I can go out and win a game, right? And the fact that I think GW is aware that they're promoting that is they're going to take a step back from it. They don't want to promote that craziness. So the big thing in organized events is now based on the points level. It will limit the number of detachments, the number of data sheets that can be included in your army, the battlefield size, and the game length, which is huge. So once again, if you play up to 1,000 points, you can bring up to 2 detachments. So you can't just spam tons of tiny detachments. You can only bring up to 2 data sheets of each, up to 2 units with the same data sheet per army. Now the only thing is, obviously, troops and dedicated transports are not included in this rule. So obviously this will favor armies with very strong troops. Battlefield size is 4x4, and the game length is up to 2 hours. Now, this is the most common grouping, 1,001 to 2,000 points. So this is where most tournaments are. This is where ETC, ITC play. Now, you can only bring up to 3 detachments per army, which is, again, huge, right? People were spamming 5 detachments for certain armies. You can only bring up to 3 units with the same data sheet per army. So there we go. No more 9 Hive Tyrants. You can't do it. And I'm okay with that. Probably because I don't own 9 Hive Tyrants, but also I've never understood the meta in that case, where you have to go out and play 9 Hive Tyrants to win a game. Like, to me, that's just not... To me, that's not what the armies are designed to do. It's not what the rules were meant to do. You're just abusing you're spamming the most cost-effective model. The battlefield size is 6x4, game length 2 to 3 hours, and if the points level is 2,001 to 3,000 points, you can bring up to 4 detachments, up to 4 units with the same data sheet per army, 8x4 table size, 3 or more hours. So that's huge. That's a huge change to the meta. That's a huge change to the competitive meta, should I say. I don't think that will ever affect my army. I don't ever bring more than 3 of any model that's not a troop. I don't think I've ever brought more than 3 of any. I have 10,000 points of Tyranids, and I have 10,000 points of Orcs, and I can field a bunch of pretty competitive lists without having to spam. So, but if you're a competitive player, you got to be now prepared. If you're willing to spend thousands of dollars, like the people I've seen in my meta who've went out and spent thousands of dollars to build a stupidly competitive list, one list that is very competitive with very few models, be prepared to have those models negated pretty quickly. Because as I said, it looks like you're going to have about a 6-month enjoyment, and then GW is going to hit you with a nerf hammer. Because that's what they're going to start doing. They're going to build a meta that's more rounded. There were some points changes to some models. Commissar is now 1,500. Sorry, for Astra Militarum, Commissar is now 15 points. Lord Commissar is 30. Minor changes. Sly Morbo is 65 points. Chaos Demon units, Feculent Gnarlmaws are 85 points per model. Craft Worlds, Dark Reapers got more expensive. They went from 9 to 12 points. They're still incredibly competitive. Farseers are 110, Spiritseers 65, Warlock 55, Warlock Conclave 45 points per model. Dark Angel units, Ravenwing Talons are now 180. Okay. Robu Gilman is now 400 points. You know what? I played against him. He is a beast. And the only thing is, so we got more. So he's now 400 points, and the new rules, as I said, prevent you from sticking another character in front of him and saving him. If you put another character, a captain, or an apothecary, a standard in front of him, it doesn't save him. We can still shoot Gilman. So cool. Tyranid units. Now, as I mentioned, Biovores got stupidly points increased to 50 points per model. I think that was like a 40%. 50% increase. I've only tried Biovores once. They are pretty cool in the new edition. And Hive Tyrant with Wings went up to 190 points. So once again, they're balancing models that they've seen in the metas. If you look through these lists, most of these models were heavily used in the metas in competitive play. You can go to an ITC or an ETC tournament, look at the tables, you'll see these models. Attempts as Astartes, the Fire Raptor gunship is now 280 points. I've never played against a Fire Raptor gunship. Death Corps Commissar is 15, a Rider Commissar is 35, and the Chaos Fire Raptor Assault gunship is 280 points. Again, I've never faced any of those models before, so I really don't know how effective they are. To me, I know how effective Tyranids are, and again, Tyranid Hive Tyrants with Wings are still amazingly competitive. Biovores, less points cost effective now. They're still pretty good, but they got a lot more expensive. So all those people who are spamming them are upset. Again, it depends on what you play for. It's one of those games now that if you want to pay to win, you're going to have to keep paying, because they're going to every 6 months really turn the meta on its head, it looks like. Yeah. And now individual rules that I thought were really cool, like Orcs, for example, they've changed it so now that if your war boss is on a bike, biker units can also take advantage of the WA. I really like that. Tyranids, as I said, with the you can't use the Swarm Lord's trait to allow models to leave the deployment zone if they deep struck in or brought in via reserves this turn. That's unfortunate. I'm going to still keep playing Tyranids and Orcs in the new games. One of the huge changes to, once again, the spam lists was this whole, obviously the soup lists, as I mentioned, but the Poxwalker lists that were becoming very dominant in tournaments. What you would do is you'd bring like a squad of Poxwalkers or 2 Poxwalkers, and then bring giant amounts of cultists, and then you keep playing, the Trader stratagem, and then you'd keep playing the other one. There's a stratagem for a point. I think it's a 1-point stratagem. Forget me if I'm wrong, but it's either way, it's just cheesy. There's a stratagem for Death Guard that every turn you could play this stratagem, and any model which dies within a certain distance, any infantry model that dies within a certain distance of a Poxwalker unit becomes a member of the Poxwalker unit. Huge. Like, that's just insane. So you bring in all these cultists, the cultists would die and then become Poxwalkers. So they would not only die and absorb wounds, they become stronger, and you'd add them, and you have this giant blob of never-ending Poxwalkers. Not anymore. And I never understood why, because Tyranids have an equivalent of with the Termagon and producing Termagants. And they FAQ'd it, and you had to pay reserve points for the Termagants you were spawning. And same with the stratagems, which made the stratagems just stupidly useless. Why would you pay reserve points to bring a squad of Hormagaunts back from the dead when you could just have 2 squads of Hormagaunts for the same points and not have to use the stratagem? Makes no sense, right? And so I didn't understand that for Tyranids, but then Poxwalker spam, you could have this never-ending group of Poxwalkers, so that would have just absorbed the table. Not anymore. So they made the big change to that is, number one, you can only use Bane of the Trader once per game, and the other thing is you can only bring the Poxwalkers back up to the original squad size, and after that you have to pay reserve points, which no one will, because why would you, right? Then you're just, again, it puts that situation where if you're going to pay to have them reserve points, you might as well just have them on the table, because then you have 2 squads of Poxwalkers that could go back up to full strength, as opposed to this constantly increasing blob size. But that's the really big one. So now, once again, the rule book. The big FAQ is the rule book, ignoring wounds, as I mentioned. It's now just you can only use 1 power that ignores wounds at a time. Embark, if all units in a model end their move within 3 inches of a friendly transport, they can embark in it. That makes sense. Organize events, of course, as I said, now they have that new rule set. The Warlord, once you've mustered your army, nominate 1 of your models to be your Warlord. It cannot be a fortification battlefield role. Apparently people are making fortifications their Warlords. Makes no sense. But again, people abusing rules as written as opposed to rules as intended. Battalion detachment and brigade detachment, as I mentioned, they've went up in command benefit points. And then, as I said, if they just FAQ'd, brought some new some clarifications on rules. Obviously, like if 2 squads are in terrain together and they shoot each other, they both still gain benefits of being in cover. If you fire at a squad and only one of them is visible and they remove the visible guy, the wounds still carry on and you still can kill the rest of the squad. Let's see here. Is it possible to use a stratagem from one codex to target a unit from another? Yes, so long as the unit with the stratagem is being used for has the appropriate keywords. Once again, like Death Guard and note that the stratagems in Codex Castiums and Tyranids are specific exceptions to this, as discussed in the relevant FAQs and errata. Yeah. So if you have like Death Guard and Alpha Legion, you can do stuff. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much the, I said, obviously Flyrants, anything with wings can ignore they ignore vertical distances, they just move horizontal. That's a big thing, so if you're charged with a Flyrant and you roll like 12, you can move 12 inches that way, including whatever is up there, it ignores that. It just lands on top of it. You can't use stratagems to move things out of the deployment zone. Once again, if you brought them in reserves, turn 1. Also, that's the other thing. It does not count if you declare a charge and you don't make it. You do not count as charging this turn. That's another big rules. Let's see. As I mentioned, the other ones. If a unit arriving as reinforcements has another unit embarked inside, in which must disembark after it has been set up, can the firing unit shoot at the unit as it disembarks? No. Makes sense. Oh, the other thing is, for Tactical Reserves match play, states that at least half your number of units in my army must be set up in the battlefield during deployment. If you have a model that contains other models, like a drop pod containing multiple squads, let's say, they use the example of, let's see, like if you have a drop pod with containing 2 squads, that counts as 3. So then 3 units would have to be set up on the table, not 1. That's good. As I said, it's interesting. Most of the other ones were pretty straightforward. Roll-offs for things that happen at the same time. Now, the other thing that, again, people were abusing was, and people got to remember, so I never played this rule because my friends and I I think we understood the rules correctly. If you have squads that have stratagems, like Tyranids have a stratagem to allow a squad to fight again. Let's say they jump into a squad, decimate it, consolidate into another squad, you play the stratagem, you can only attack that second squad providing you declared an assault against them in this turn. Makes sense. So, yeah, as I said, there's a lot of FAQs, but a lot of them are army specific. I can't go over all of them, but obviously the big ones are the rule of 3 in competitive play is huge. It really will change how the competitive meta is with lists, and I'm actually happy about that. I'd like to see how they do, and that way if you see a competitive Tyranid list, you can actually understand, you can emulate it. Combination of Flyrants, which of course there'll be 3 of them. Biowars, there might be 3 of them, and it'd be interesting. The big FAQ is good, and yeah, as I said, they also did like Xenos 2, a couple small things, Adeptus Mechanicus, Imperium 2, Space Marines, Imperial Armor, Chaos Space Marines, Xenos 1, Tyranids, chapter approved, like about a dozen codices. Not all of them though, I believe. Maybe all of them. No, not all of them. Dark Angels weren't touched, Blood Angels weren't touched, Grey Knights weren't touched. Adeptus Custodes weren't touched. Yeah, there were a bunch of FAQs for each army. I can't really go over them all of them. I'd have to go army specific. So my question is, what do you think of the big FAQ which dropped yesterday? What are your favorite rules? What are your least favorite rules? How are your armies affected? Right? What do you think about the competitive play? All these questions, I'd really love to start a discussion with you all. Thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned for more videos reviewing contents of Games Workshop. And as I mentioned, I should probably mention, this is a video brought to you by my Patreon subscribers. And if you want to help support my videos like these, please check out the link in the description below to support my Patreon campaign. So stay tuned for more videos. Until next time, this is Jay saying, happy painting.